All right, good evening, everybody. This is the City of Garden City's Planning and Zoning Commission meeting on Wednesday, February 21st, 2024. Let the record show it is 6:35 p.m. Confirming that we do have audio and visual. We did have that confirmation earlier. And as such, I'll now call the meeting to order. For the record, we do have Commissioners Wild, Shepherd, and Brown present. And with that, we'll move into the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, with the agenda, we have two changes to the agenda. SUB FY 2022-0004. Elle Estates, a combined preliminary final plat, moved to a date certain of March 20th, 2024. B CUP FY 2024-0003. Applicant Chris Anderson with Rudine Architects. And that's also moved to a date certain of March 20th, 2024. Staff, are there any other changes to the agenda?
Chairman, none by staff.
Okay. Thank you. With that, move to the consent agenda, which contains one item that is the approval of the minutes from the January 17th, 2024 meeting. I'll entertain a motion for the consent agenda.
Mr. Chair. I'll move approval of the consent agenda to include the minutes from January 17, 2024, and also to include the two items you just mentioned, to move those to a date certain of March 20, 2024.
Have a motion. Do we hear a second?
I second.
Have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it. All right, to the action items, we have two items on the agenda this evening. DSR FY 2020-20, that is an appeal, and also CUP FY 2024-0004. We will begin tonight's proceedings hearing the item DSR FY 2020-20, which is an appeal of the administrative design review decision to deny a plan modification of DSR FY 2020-20 located at 106 East 36th Street, Garden City, Idaho 83714. So with the appeal, there are some procedural items that we'll need to take care of first. The first being a conflict of any of the commissioners. Within the materials, there was information regarding conflicts. Did all the commissioners have the opportunity to review the conflict statement?
Yes, I did.
All right, so with that, Commissioner Wild, do you see or have any potential conflicts?
I do not.
Brown, Commissioner Shepherd?
No, I don't have any conflicts.
Okay, and I do not as well. So there are no conflicts tonight that we will need to address. I'll now go through the actual procedures for the appeal. This appeal is based on the December 1st, 2023 official determination that the proposed gate was not in conformance with the initial approval and was denied the plan modification request, citing Garden City Code, which prohibits fences greater than 3.5 feet in height. And that is the item that's currently being discussed. Staff, any other items?
Chairman, none that staff would address, but perhaps the appellant would weigh in as well.
Okay, and we can get to the actual applicant and the issues. So at this point, the parties had the opportunity to submit for the record. And at this point, is there any items that have been addressed regarding the record, the transcripts, or any other items regarding the record for this appeal?
Staff as a respondent would say that there's no issues on the respondent's part with the record materials.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
So the standard of review is that the Planning and Zoning Commission's role is to review the decisions of the planning official. When reviewing a decision of the planning official, the Planning and Zoning Commission shall review the record of the planning official with due regard for the planning official's decision. The standard of review for an appeal of the planning official's decision to the Planning and Zoning Commission shall not be de novo, but the record may be supplemented by new such evidence as may be presented. The standard of review shall be governed by the following: deference, due deference shall be given to the actions of the planning official. The burden of proof in all the appeals pursuant to Title 8 of the Garden City Code, the burden of proof shall be on the applicant. The order of the hearing itself: first, the appellant shall present its argument. Second, the respondent shall present its argument. Third, the appellant shall present any rebuttal argument. The planning and zoning will then be required to deliberate, and the oral opinion for each of the items being appealed must be concluded prior to adjournment of the hearing. A decision for each item being appealed must be determined through a separate motion and vote on a roll call to each member of the Planning and Zoning Commission. After the Planning and Zoning Commission hearing of the appeal, the commission shall make its written decision and adopt findings of fact and conclusion by its next regularly scheduled meeting. The Planning and Zoning Commission decision shall determine whether the application or petition should be in part or in its entirety granted with conditions, remanded to the decision maker, planning official for additional proceedings and findings, or denied. So the Planning and Zoning Commission's actions shall mean the following: affirm, to agree with and confirm with the planning official's decision; vacate, to cancel or render the planning official's decisions null and void; remand, send it back to the planning official for additional proceedings and findings; or reverse, to change the planning official's decision so that the decision of the planning official is overturned. The grounds for affirming the decision by the planning official is to grant with conditions, or deny the application or petition. And the following grounds is if it is the planning official's findings, inferences, conclusions, or decisions are not in violation of constitutional or statutory provisions; if the planning official's findings, inferences, conclusions, or decisions are not in excess of the statutory authority of the agency; if the planning official's findings, inferences, inclusions, or decisions are not made upon unlawful procedures; if the planning official's findings, inferences, conclusions, or decisions are supported by substantial evidence of the record as a whole; or if the planning official findings, inferences, conclusions, or decisions are not arbitrary, capricious, or an abuse of discretions. The grounds for vacating, remanding, or reversing the decision by the planning official: the following may serve as grounds for vacating, remanding, or reversing all or parts of the Planning Commission's decision: if the true intent of Title 8 of the Garden City Code or the codes adopted thereunder have been incorrectly interpreted by the planning official; if the provisions of Title 8 of the Garden City Code or the codes adopted thereunder do not apply, or an equally good or better form of construction should have been applied by the planning official; if findings made by the planning official as a basis for its actions are not supported by the weight of the evidence; if there is a significant error in the application of the provisions of Title 8 or other provisions of the city code that is important to sustaining the action by the planning official; if it is determined that there is a significant violation of the notice provisions of the codes enumerated in Title 8 of the Garden City Code; if significant errors are discovered that were committed by the planning official, or if the materials provided to the planning official; or if there is significant error in the application of approved city policies that is important to sustaining the action taken by the planning official. So with that, that is the procedures for tonight. So we can begin again. It will be the appellant, the respondent, the rebuttal, and then deliberations by the commission. So with that, we will hear from the appellant. If the appellant can state your name and address when you come up to the stand, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
Commissioner. Is this the stand?
Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner. So I am assuming that everybody has read the appeal that we submitted. So this is a little bit of a unique issue here in what is being denied is not really what was originally denied. It's a little bit confusing. And that there was never any actual modification request with regard to the gate. The gate was approved and there was extensive, as everybody here is aware, extensive meetings to discuss elements of the Garden City Code, the application, and whether the winery, I'm gonna call it the winery, whether Proletariat met those code sections.
Mr.
And,
Chair, can we just get your name and address?
oh,
for the
sorry, I
record?
forgot that part. Yes,
Thank you.
Danielle Perret, Perret Law, and my work address is 913 West River Street, Suite 420, Boise, Idaho, 83702.
Thank you.
Thank you for reminding me
Sure.
of my omission. So here, and I think, let me just, one thing I'd like to do, is my flash drive on here? Yeah. Okay, so what I'd like to just kind of start with doing, which I think is helpful, is just a visual of where the gate. Let me see if I can figure out how to. Okay, do I just double click on it? When I do this on my own computer, sometimes it doesn't do the. Okay, so this is the gate that was approved. Right here. Can I do it like a side by side?
You can do, but I don't know how you
How to do
have
it?
to do that. I guess you could go. Do you know if you can use that?
You can move all the Zoom participants over to the side.
Yeah, so let me see if I can figure that out.
Like a
My computer, yeah, it kind of does like where I can have like two separate screens kind of. So I think it's helpful to kind of see what was approved and what was installed just for a visual. So that we can discuss this in more detail. So let's see. If I can figure this out. Okay. So. All right, so this is the gate that was actually installed, right? You can see where it's lined up here. And then this is the gate. Up there. All right. Okay, so this is the gate that was approved. And you can see where it's positioned, right? It's positioned here. This was approved and this was deemed to meet Garden City Code when it comes to fences and walls. No, it is not flush with the building, right? It's out here. But Garden City Code and the setback requirements also says that it can alternatively be 12 feet back from the sidewalk. And my client is not really responsible for, you know, she was told that this met Garden City Code. So I want to do that again. So I just want to show that picture again. So you can see where this is, right? And then you can see. If I could do it side by side, that probably would be better, but. And you can see it's exactly in the same exact place. There's no change in the position of the gate whatsoever from what was approved. There was no modification to the setback that was approved. Does everybody see that? Would it be helpful for me to do it side by side, or is that good enough? Okay, so I want to go in here and just bring up the staff report. Where's that? All right, so here is a staff report. And I'm just going to scroll through this to page 10. Or past it. Okay, here we go. So here you see Title 8, Chapter 4, Design and Developmental Regulations, and the specific code section that this is being denied on 8/4A-3 fences and walls. And it says no compliance issues noted. Nobody ever raised that this was not in conformance with Garden City Code. And in fact, it was specifically told, or my clients were told, that it did meet Garden City Code. There was no change or modification to the positioning of the gate. What did change, and I wouldn't really call it a modification, is that the design element of the gate, and you can see that as well, bring it back to the foreground here. The way that this gate looks visually is not exactly the same as the gate that was in the drawing. But everybody knew that this was not what was going to be installed. And Garden City Planning Commission had the opportunity to say the gate has to be a certain design element, it needs to be pre-approved, it needs to only be a certain height, it can only have certain types of design elements, but they didn't do that. That was not what the issue was about. And now it seems that they're trying to modify the requirement of Garden City Code, saying it wasn't met simply because they don't like the gate that was installed. But for all intents and purposes, this gate, bring it up again. Here is exactly in the same position as the gate that was approved. For these reasons, we think that the section of the code has been misapplied, and we think that the gate should stand as is, because this was what was approved. The gate is exactly in the same place that was approved. And for my client to have to try to move this gate back now would be a substantial hardship. There were, how many hearings did you have? 5, 6? And this was never once was it raised until this appeal letter that there was an issue with this section of Garden City Code until we received the appeal letter. That is patently unfair. Does anybody have any questions?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I have a question. But I would like for you to put the picture back
Sure.
of the gate that was submitted, the sample gate, and I understand that the specific design. Yeah, that picture. And I agree, that gate that is shown there, it attaches to where it's projected out from the post that holds up the deck. If you look at this picture that was presented, could you tell us about how tall is that gate that is shown on that picture?
I'd say it's over 3.5 feet. Miss Bagley, yeah. I mean, you can see the tree there. And you can see the bikes. So it's definitely over 4 feet.
Take
And
a
that
look
could have
at
been a
the,
condition, but it
look
wasn't.
at the bicycles. Look, and then tell me about how high is that gate that is shown in that picture?
I would say, how tall would you say the gate is? 5 feet? But this was just an illustration. I want to also, if that's, there were other gate designs that were submitted in addition to that gate design that were higher. But I would say that gate is over.
Yeah, excuse me a second.
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm very familiar with the other design that was shown, but that picture right there, that you answered my question.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
I do have a question, Mr. Chairman. When I was looking at all the papers, I didn't see if there was like any other renderings that showed the length, because when I look at that, I see about a 3.5 foot fence. I mean, if there's nothing that shows anything Do you know if there's anything in that was originally provided that showed the lengthening, as you said, 5 feet?
Sure, and yes, there are. So let me show that to you here. So, okay, so. There were several renderings that were provided that were contained, I think, as exhibits as well in my appeal letter. So let me figure out what my flash drive is on here. And those were attached to the appeal letter. Gonna pull up the exhibits. We'll just pull up the letter itself. That probably would be easier. Okay.
I'm familiar with the pictures that I think you're trying to pull up, but I mean like a architectural design that has like all of the like measurements.
I think there was one more that had a gate that was, and I think I have these attached. I'm just looking here. So there were these that were presented. So this is clearly over 4 feet. That was presented. This was presented. This is also maybe a little, this looks like it's over 4 feet. I think this one right here is definitely over 4 feet. And then this was kind of just some examples of various service gates here. So when you look at this one, I think there's no doubt about the fact that this is over 4.5 feet, if that's an issue.
And I have one more question. In the final decision document, I noted that the design review committee asked to see the service drive and gate design renderings. And that was dated September 8th, 2020. I didn't see if those were ever provided before the gate was put in.
I think these are them right here. So this is mural fabrication examples that were provided.
These are examples though. Did they ever show the actual gate? Because I thought that they wanted to see, these were provided before the decision document, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So then in the final decision, when they asked to see the actual gate design renderings, were those provided?
What was that? I think they, because we didn't have the gate design until, or fabricated until later in the process in 2023, they were provided at that time.
And one other issue I want to raise along these lines is that, we're talking about, once again, I want to pull back to the, this here. So 8-4-A-3 is specifically about fences over 3.5 feet. And it said no compliance issues noted. So that's what's addressed in that section of the Garden City Code. Our fences over 3.5 feet.
So I do have a question for you, following up on your assertion that the code states that there's no compliance issues. You've not been able to provide any renderings or documentation that shows the size that you submitted besides your guesstimation based on bicycles that are on some rendering. And the record shows in the transcripts that were provided, the interview with Chad, on one of the pages, it's talking about, it states the question, that was the art mural that's going in front of the staircase that will also extend to the gate, question mark. Yes, it needs to be a continuous piece that all ties together. But the gate would also have this, not just a vertical picket type gate. You're showing me a vertical picket gate, which is clearly different than what was submitted in the DR packet. So are you telling me that DR approved a vertical picket style gate that's now installed, or did they approve what you're showing us as a decorative gate that looks like vines and what you showed us in the rendering? Because they're two different things. Yes, a gate's a gate, I get it, but we're also talking about something that's a concept versus, and what was approved as a concept versus what was actually provided. And it's my understanding that was approved, what was the concept just like any other approval that you go through for a building permit. You have certain colors that are approved. Paint's paint. You have certain stucco or siding that's approved. Siding. So there's a difference between changing it after the fact that's approved and putting in what was approved. So can you just help me work with me there so I can understand what you're saying? Because I'm a little confused on you saying what's installed was approved.
So I don't think that what was installed is a modification of what was understood was going to be installed. It was supposed to be a gate that had some kind of fabrication that was going to tie in with the winery. The gate that was installed has a photo of the logo for the winery and it ties in. There was never a qualification that it couldn't have any form of pickets on it. It's a fence. It's designed, or it's a gate. It's not a fence. It's designed to keep people out and to shelter back the service drive. ACHD required a gate. And that was a requirement by ACHD. And it had to be a one-way gate to keep people from going through and driving onto the other side of the road. So at all times, what was intended to be installed here was a gate. And at this point, it almost feels like the commission is trying to say it should have been a fence. And it wasn't intended to be a fence. It was at all times intended to be a gate.
Any other questions?
I'm still looking at the rule. I think I heard you say that the rule about fences and walls 8-4A3 pertains specifically to fences 3.5 feet high, but there's also information in here on fences that are 6 feet high and how far back they have to be. How high is the fence that you put in?
So do you know how high the fence is? I mean, it curves.
It
So
looked like it was about 6 feet.
It's probably 6 to 7 feet.
if there was supposed to be some form of limitation on the height of a service gate, that should have been something that was communicated and a condition of approval, and it was not. My client relied substantially on these multiple hearings that she had prior to purchasing that gate and installing that gate to make sure she was in compliance.
Mr. Shepherd, any other questions?
No, I have no further questions. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Wild.
Since that last thing you said raises an issue, relating to your letter regarding hardship. What was the cost of that fence? I saw some receipts in there, but it didn't look like the right receipts for that fence or gate.
I think, yeah, it's not the cost of the gate so much as the cost to move the gate at this point.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you.
If there's anything else that I can provide to the committee to assist with our review, please reach out and let me know.
Thank you. And you will have an opportunity to respond as well after staff's presentation.
Thank you. There's much.
Chairman and members of the commission, Jenna Thornborough, acting on behalf of the respondent today. I think that the issue is well vetted before the commission today per the appellant's presentation. Just to reiterate what you read in the transcripts, no doubt, was that the fence, the gate was the subject of a lot of discussion throughout the design review hearings. And the reason for that is because of that patio element that's acting to meet code 84C3's requirements, where the patio itself is acting to meet the 15-foot maximum setback that's required for 60% of the frontage. And so there was a lot of discussion about how that gate would interact with the patio and bringing the patio element across the frontage. And there is a timeline laid out in the material documents as well as somewhat in the memorandum to you about the timeline of where the gate was installed and then was not approved by the design review and the changes, and ultimately resulted in the denial based on 8.4A3 fences and walls that require fences that are greater than 3.5 feet. I'll read directly from code, shall be set back flush or behind the building frontage. Where there is no frontage, fences greater than 3.5 feet shall be set back minimally 10 feet from the back of the sidewalk, so as to allow for street trees and landscaping between the fence and the sidewalk. I do want to point out just one item on the original decision document. Site-specific requirements for the duration of the use. Condition number 1 does require compliance with 8.4.3 fences and walls. And so I don't believe that it was the intent of the design review to leave that as a nebulous requirement, even though the exact dimensions hadn't been established at that point in time. I also would like to point out that there's a draft potential decision document that's been provided to you. It is drafted both granting the appeal and denying the appeal. Certainly, this is your decision. You can change that document as you see fit. Staff has tried to identify potential findings, both in the affirmative and in denial. Should you agree with those, you could adopt those as is, choosing one or the other, obviously, or you could amend those tonight. And with that, I stand for any questions.
Any questions? Commissioner Brown?
Mr. Chairman, Jenna, could you bring up that previous picture that I had brought up? That's the correct one. I have a couple of questions. That's the one. That gate is anchored, swings from where the post, which corresponds with the front of the deck, the further toward the road. And what we're interpreting, and normally we do this, the frontage is back where the wall for the building is. Is that correct?
Chairman, Commissioner Brown, in this interpretation of the code, that would be correct. Where the cursor is, that would be the building frontage. I do want to bring up, though, that this patio is looked at as the frontage in the approval document as well. And that the patio area with this decorative fencing, if you look through the transcripts, does talk about it fulfilling the 15-foot maximum setback area.
Then that really does prompt a couple of questions then. If we think about, let's assume that the fence that it's the gate, and I understand how the rules that apply to walls equally apply to gates that are, and fences applies to the gates that are part of the fence system. So that, and they're not a separate gates, if I understand it correctly, they're not separate from the requirements for the height of the fence. Is that correct? If that was a fence there.
Chairman, Commissioner Brown, the way that staff has interpreted code for as long as I've been here is that fences and gates are one of the same in applying code, and that there's not special provisions identified for gates.
Thank you. And that's also my understanding. And it's always how we've always previously interpreted issues that having to do with fences and gates. And we've had them before. But, so let me ask, if the gate that as it's now built with the pickets and with the logo on it were built and it, instead of attaching where that post is, it attached back there where the wall is, where the corner on the wall is. If it was behind that, we would not be here. Is that correct?
Chairman Commissioner Brown, yes, that was an option that was provided by the design committee. I did go out and speak with the applicant and look at this on site. They're unable to do that because of some of the structures that are coming down the stair structure would impede the ability to attach to the building
At that point.
at that point.
But
That is
it could
correct.
be attached to a post that you've installed there. Is that correct?
Chairman
next-
Commissioner Brown, I will let the appellant address that directly. I could speculate saying perhaps there could be a location there, but I'm not sure if based on operations, et cetera, and speaking with the then applicant rather than the appellant. I believe that there are issues that I might not remember correctly, and I prefer that the appellant address those issues.
I will ask that question in the rebuttal phase. But if the gate that is shown there, and I'm presuming that gate that is shown is pretty close to 3 to 3.5 feet. The reason I base that is a normal bicycle, like you say, there are 27 inches high, a 27-inch bike, or they're at the most with a 27-inch wheel. They're about 30 inches high, or at the most about 3 feet. So I'm assuming that that's shown. So if in fact we had it built a gate that was pretty much like the one shown there, doesn't have to be the exact same trellis pattern, but we fastened it where it's swaying, where the post is, then we also wouldn't be here. Is that correct?
Chairman Commissioner Brown, are you saying if it was fastened here?
If
at the
it was shown
stereo?
as it's shown there, it goes at right where it's the one that's built there, it comes out from where the post is, that's at the front of the post. Okay, if in fact what we had was there a 3.5 foot high gate, then we wouldn't be here, is what I'm saying. Is that correct?
Chairman Commissioner Brown, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff?
Just briefly, one of the opportunities here is to address the true intent of the code. So the sentence that reads, fences greater than 3.5 feet shall be set back to be flush or behind the building frontage. That's really the sentence I think we're here to address. Can you, with your many years of experience in this code and doing what you do, tell me what you think the true intent of that sentence is? Is it, yeah, I'll let you answer.
Chairman Commissioner Wild, I really think that is to allow the life, this philosophically, the life of whatever is occurring on a property to interact and engage with the street versus being concealed and blocked off from the street.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Jenna, I just want to reiterate or ask you to reiterate something that you said to make sure I'm understanding it when I take what you say and apply it to the code. What I think I heard you say, oh, I'm sorry, would you mind putting up that picture again? Thank you. So generally speaking, we would think of the frontage of the building to be where you had originally had your mouse on where the white wall is. But in the conversations with the applicant, we talked about, or it was talked about that the patio frontage would be considered part of the building frontage? Is that what you said?
Chairman, Commissioner Shepherd, that is correct. And the way that this application was reviewed, there is a section of code 8-4C3 that requires, well, 8-4C3A2, that a maximum setback of 15 feet is achieved. And that patio element was reviewed as achieving that 60-foot or 60% of the streetscape, achieving that 15-foot setback. The structure itself is set back more than 15 feet.
Okay, so is it correct to think then that the applicant could have correctly assumed that if that was considered the front of the building, the front of the patio is considered part of that, that when you apply the code to it, and it's the sentence that Commissioner Wild was just talking about, fences greater than 3.5 feet shall be set back to be flush or behind the building frontage. So that to me would be flush with the building frontage if that's considered to be the building frontage. And it specifically talks about fences greater than 3.5 feet.
Chairman,
So-
Commissioner Shepherd, that certainly could be an interpretation that the Planning and Zoning Commission finds tonight. There is reference to that in the draft potential findings in granting the appeal.
Okay.
Any other questions? Mr. Brown?
Mr. Chairman, and thank you, that did prompt another question. Then if we assumed or declared that the frontage of which that particular part of the code applies to was parallel with those posts that are on the outer edge of the deck, and then come down to, and the patio is behind those, right? If we managed to declare that would be considered the frontage, okay? Would the gate, the way it's built, if we declared that was the frontage and where the gate is now fastened and rotates from, would be even with or behind it, is that correct?
Chairman, Commissioner Brown, that would be correct.
And would the fact that it is 6 or 7 feet tall run into any other kind of a problem with the setback requirements?
Chairman, Commissioner Brown, provided that it's a 6-foot fence or otherwise approved through other steps in code, then that 8-4A3D would be met if that's considered the frontage.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you. Rebuttal, please.
I think that a good point was just raised as an alternative with regard to where the building frontage actually is. And this kind of highlights how confusing this issue is. That, you know, after this has been approved, where is the building frontage? And to the layperson, the building frontage looks like it's, you know, where that post fence is. But that's maybe part of the rationale for having the fence set back more prominent or set forward more prominently because of that whole defining patio element, which was at play in the design review approval process as well. So I think that that's definitely a very good alternative in terms of taking a look at how, you know, that could be said to have met Garden City Code, even if we are making an assumption that the fence in the rendering was under 3.5 feet, which once again, I don't, this is a service gate. And I think it's a little bit illogical to think that a service gate would be under 3.5 feet. And if that was an element, that should have been something that was brought to the attention of the owner, so that that could be properly planned for, and it was known that that gate had to be under 3.5 feet, but that was never highlighted. And you can kind of see just with this conversation, how nobody can really determine how tall that gate is. I think that it's clear it's at least 4 feet. But if it's somewhere in that gray zone, that's something that should have been raised by planning and, or not planning and zoning, we're at planning and zoning, by the design review committee, because we're trying to work with Garden City here. We're trying to build a building that is aesthetically pleasing, meets code, and multiple hearings had been held to verify that this plan was in accordance with the design review committee and with the applicable Garden City code. And this was never raised. You can't find one place that it was raised other than in the appeal letter. So I think that is patently unfair to raise that issue now and to have not raised it earlier, because if that was going to be an issue, we would have been happy to have designed it that way, but that was not known and that was not rationally conceived of with regard to a service gate. So for the reasons that we discussed, we believe that, you know, I think we have a couple of alternatives here. Either it does meet the building frontage because of where it butts up with the patio, or alternatively, it was approved the way that it was with the understanding that it could be conceivably over 3.5 feet. Any questions that I can answer?
Commissioners, Commissioner Brown?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I want to go back to the question that I asked Jenna. I think we can all remember, but if you could put that picture back up, it might help. The picture of the gate that was presented to the design review committee. Yeah, that's the one. Mr. Chairman, let me return. I'm just assuming for asking my question, and it's not, don't interpret it as something, but let's assume that we don't approve your appeal. And one of the options to make it comply with the code, if we did that, would be to move it back to where the wall and count that as the frontage, which is on most buildings, that's what we count it. Jenna indicated there might be some kind of a problem with mounting a gate, taking the gate that you now have and mounting it there on the wall. Is there a problem with putting a post in there to mount the gate on?
I believe that there is. I'll let Elizabeth speak to that.
Yes, so the gate.
She should probably go up there.
If you don't mind joining and state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is Elizabeth Baggerly. I'm at 37 Horseshoe View Circle, Horseshoe Bend, Idaho, 83629. My personal address. So yeah, so the gate is too wide. If you pushed it back, you would have to actually cut the gate. It just doesn't make any sense. Plus, there is no way to hang it on the, you'd have, if you put a post in there, I think it interferes with some, out of the floor. Under the stairway, there's some fire. I'm not good at this. The fire, something, you know, there's protective things. And if you put the gate there, you'd have to put a post in the way of these where they don't want that, they need access to it. And then on the other side, you'd have to put, you know, obviously put a post in the ground, but the gate itself is too wide if you set it back because the building goes in. So you'd have to cut the gate. I mean, it wouldn't be.
You'd have to modify the gate.
You'd have to modify the gate
Thank you.
significantly.
That's the question.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I just would like to see a picture of that gate again, if that's okay, the one that's up there.
Sure.
Okay,
And if it helps, not the one that you originally gave in your,
the picture that I presented.
yeah. And if it's okay if not, I have it on my, the one you
I
presented.
got the flash drive here. Check it out. I don't know.
There was a different angle.
Yeah, and we tried to take a picture of the gate from the same angle that it was from the picture rendering or the rendering of the approval to provide the committee with an appropriate visual. My audio visual technology is being challenged. Okay, so let me see. Let me get to the flash drive. Sorry, Jenna, can you just? Okay, sorry. So here it is.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No, I just wanted to see it again. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Wong?
so I haven't been to Proletariat yet. I need to get there. Behind the gate, to the left, under the deck, is that a patio for public?
It is.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, commissioners. Thoughts, Commissioner Shepherd?
Thank you, Chairman Montoya. I was first thinking that in my mind, the frontage of the building was that white wall and that it was clearly out of code compliance, but having heard Jenna say that it was discussed and decided that the front of the patio, and I guess it's kind of aligned with the top of that rooftop would be the front of the building, then I think it does meet code because it says fences greater than 3.5 feet shall be set back to be flush or behind the building frontage. And so that to me is flush with the building frontage. And it is far back off the sidewalk, so maybe I would feel differently if it wasn't. But the way I read the code, I can see how it would be unclear. And I wouldn't, I don't know that I would have questioned it if I saw it in the design review or the staff report that it said compliance conditioned. Knowing that we had the conversation that is the building frontage, I don't think I would have gone past that. So I'm thinking that the fence should be left as is.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Brown?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I understand why the building official made the decision that she made. I think that in the presentation, at least of what we've been shown, I very carefully read all of the materials that were provided to us, that the only two renderings that showed a gate attached to where that post is that's on the front of the patio and it holds the patio up. The only two that they actually showed a gate. Appears to me like the gate that was shown was 3.5 feet tall. Or even maybe a little less, maybe 3 feet tall. Based on already explained, based on the other picture on how high I know bicycles are. And so I understand how we got where we are. Because I think that was presented and the people that assumed that looked at that were thinking it would have been, regardless, it would have been in compliance with our regulations. It's and then thinking in terms of how we normally think that the frontage of the building corresponds to the structural frontage end of that corner. And in that case, a gate 3.5 feet tall, attached there, meets all the requirements and we wouldn't be here. But that wasn't what was built, and I must admit, remember this was over 2 years ago when design review, it was before we had the current process. This one, we still had a design review committee that was meeting. And so in between that, a lot of time, and in their case, a lot of construction. So that being said, I think that this design wise, from my viewpoint, this gate that's shown here with the logo and everything, it's actually a nice looking gate and it fits in with it. And it fits the requirements when you think about it. The ACHD was thinking about what they're thinking about is not something that it's something that well, they want something that precludes vehicles from going around there and going on to Osage by going down there. So that's what their requirement was for. But that being said, if we can declare for our purposes that the frontage and there, as Jenna already pointed out, there was some discussion to the fact that the front of the patio for the purposes of this building, especially since it has that deck up on the top, is not the structural part, but it's out there where that post is, then this gate would more or less meet the criteria that we'd have. So that leaves us with, how do you do this? And we may have to get some instructions from Jenna. But my thinking would be, I would like to make a ruling that, and I've already made in my little speech, just in there recognizing why the staff made the decision they did. I understand why they made the decision they did like that. I think that they were correctly representing what the intent was in the regulations. But that being said, I can see that it seems to me that we're being a bit draconian if we make them go back, completely redesign, because to pull it out here and make it 3.5 feet high, first it won't do that. It will cost quite a bit of extra money. This gate would have to be totally done away with. And if we made a modify this gate, I don't see how you do that really. So what I'm trying to think with, I guess what we do is approve their appeal in some way, and in the process declare that in our judgment, we're basing it on the fact that we're counting on the frontage being out there where the posts are and not back against the building.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown, and we can talk about the decision document because it seems like condition 16 does potentially cover what you're thinking of, but first let's hear what Commissioner Wild has to say.
I thank you. First of all, I want to say the gate's beautiful. I mean, it's obviously expensive. It looks great. It's pretty close to all the designs that were presented. I entirely agree with everything that's been stated, in particular, the prior decision being focused on, I'll call it the end of the deck as the frontage for the building. I think that's a significant element and should be part of our decision making here. I don't want to set aside this true intent of the code question that Jenna artfully answered. I think that is the truth. I agree with her that the true intent of the code is to bring life out to the street. In this particular case, and this is why I asked what's behind the gate, what's under the deck. The light is there and it don't know that you necessarily want this kind of life out on the sidewalk. So I think we can still meet the intent of the code. I agree that, staff has not necessarily, misinterpreted or, has made significant error. That's the language of the draft, in this interpretation. I think this is an oddly small but complicated little question we are answering. That's a long way of saying I'm supportive of the appeal.
Thank you, Commissioner Wild. I agree with the fellow commissioners. I would say that I appreciate that staff did bring this to our attention because there is a question of application of code. And it's their responsibility to bring this up if it does pose a question. I would say that it's hard to create some sort of certainty on a rendering where there's no dimensions. So trying to imply that there's a certain height, I think is silly. And when there's an interpretation or maybe an understanding that code be followed and that isn't defined, then that leaves room for error. So I could see how that could be within the question of whether or not code was applied or not, and why the question came back to us. I do agree with the commissioners that on the frontage that I would consider it the frontage of the building because there is a functioning space above and below, which for me is a structure. And so it's not like you have some sort of overhang that's not being used. So for me, I think this applies and the code would meet the intent of the code with having that taller fence where it is located. So with that, any other deliberation, any other comments from the commission?
Mr. Chair, I might just add, maybe for the benefit of the audience and the appellant. We talk about fences a lot in Garden City because we have a lot of chain link fence. We have a lot of sidewalks that are bad. We have a lot of places where sidewalks are needed and people don't want to put them in. So we talk about fences a lot, and I've been on this commission a long time. Commissioner Brown's been on this. We've got a lot of years of experience trying to improve Garden City and make properties comport with our code. And we think we've done a pretty good job. So I just want you to know, like, it seems silly that we're all just talking about your nice gate, but it's pretty important for the long-term benefit of Garden City.
Thank you, Commissioner Wild. So Commissioner Brown, I would suggest and maybe take a second to read condition 16, which is granting of the appeal. It does talk about that the reason statements being that the gate is mounted flush with the roof deck, which is a part of the building frontage.
I have it pulled up right here. Okay.
All right, with that, so at this point, I would entertain a motion and then we will take roll call on the motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move, I think I will be saying it correctly, to grant the appeal on the grounds and by the determination as outlined in paragraph 16, especially with regard to the third paragraph, the way it's drafted there, that the gate is mounted flush with the roof deck, which is part of the building frontage. And I think that's important. And all of the remaining other reasons that are in that draft decision document.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. I'll now take roll call for a yes or no. Commissioner Shepherd.
Chairman, point of order, just a second on the motion.
Okay.
I'll
We have
make a second.
All right.
All right, we have a first and a second on the motion. Commissioner Shepherd,
Yes, I second the motion.
Commissioner Brown. Oh, you.
I made the motion.
Well, second, I say yes to the motion as well.
So
Yeah.
that was a roll
So-
call, I believe.
So I'm a yes.
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 All right, thank you very much.
All right. There you have it. You have been granted the appeal.
Thank you.
Very much. Come on down, Roser. That's one, and I'm independent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioners, are we good to continue? Is there a break in order? Any preference?
I could have it, I could use a 10-minute break.
Okay, let's go ahead and break until 7:50. All right, the time being 7:50, we will begin the meeting again. We'll be on item number 7, new business, public hearings, action item B, CUP FY 2024-0004, applicant Jenny Strozikowski. All right. With Houndstown, Boise, requesting a conditional use for dog and cat boarding, dog daycare at 4048 West Chinden Boulevard, Ada County Parcel R2734502105, located in the C1 Highway Commercial Zoning District. Again, the process will follow the applicant with presenting first. Again, please state your name and address, followed by city staff, then a public hearing, rebuttal testimony, closing of the public hearing, discussion among the commissioners, motion, any further discussion, and the decision. So with that, we'll have the applicant go ahead and state your name and address, please.
So my name is Jenny, and this is my husband, Brett Strozikowski. Our address is 2835 North Devlin Avenue, Meridian, Idaho, 83646. So we are proposing a new business we need a conditional use permit for a new business. It is a doggy daycare and boarding facility, plus we'll also have a little small space for cat boarding. It is with a franchise. The franchise name is Houndstown. They are not much in the west yet. They have quite a few buildings out east. They have about 100 open right now and are still getting bigger. I will kind of go over and touch on some of the things on the staff report that were brought as concerns and just kind of discuss that and kind of what our thoughts are on that to help go forward with that. So looking in the staff report, first the HVAC and trash enclosures. So the back of our building is a very small, narrow space between the building and Osage. As of right now, there is a back concrete patio, which is our rolling door that we have access to. And then a dumpster, trash dumpster, 4-yard dumpster, and then the AC and HVAC units back there. It is Garden City Code to enclose those to protect them from being seen. We have spoken to Republic Services for the trash dumpster. They said because of how narrow Osage is and how narrow our space is behind the building, it would be impossible to build an enclosure that has the gate swinging capabilities. They have to have a 12 by 18 foot gates opening at least 120 degrees and then posting into the ground for them to get that truck down. But also they wouldn't be able to rotate the dumpster out for the truck, the front of the truck to access it. So they said with the dumpster, there would be no way to make an enclosure. We're willing to look at options, but we were hoping we would be able to waive this requirement just because of that difficulty with the dumpster and the small space behind Osage. And similar thing with the HVAC units. Again, we're willing to enclose them if that is the decision of the commission. However, it is a very narrow space back there. I have a paper, just doing a little research online. I have a little thing from Traeger HVAC information, and it just talks about an HVAC unit should have a clearance space of at least 2 to 3 feet around them horizontally. There is no way to get that much space around them based on the size and location of where everything's at right now. And I know there are some pictures in the back of, I think it's the staff report, that kind of show the back of the building. So you can see, yeah, on the back of the staff report on page 23. So you can kind of see that building, the back of the building there. The yellow posts are about a foot out from the HVAC units there. We did go back and take some measurements. So it would have to be further out than that, which would be right on the edge of the Osage right of way. So we are hoping to discuss that and potentially waive those 2 requirements, but are willing to work with you guys and whatever is necessary. Moving on, the staff report, landscaping is another question. This building was completely remodeled in 2023. The landscaping included. So they tore out a bunch of things and planted everything in April of 2023. They're working with a landscape company called Banana Landscape. We have spoken to them and what is present there. There's a couple different concerns with the landscaping. It did, comments said that the areas do not appear to consist of 70% vegetation. We have spoken to Ben Shirk of Banana Landscape, and he does say once those bushes and shrubs are mature, that should meet that 70% vegetation rule. It's just as of right now, they're still fairly new in the area. There was also concern about the trees. So there was the requirement to have 3 frontage trees on both sides of the building. There's discussion with Osage, again, with that tiny narrow space, there is no way to plant trees back there. So according to this, it does say that they are willing to waive the 3 frontage trees on Osage, but there is still discussion about the 3 frontage trees on Chinden. As of right now, we have Japanese holly trees. They are an evergreen, and there's a little question on whether they're trees or shrubs. It is kind of depends on who you ask and where you look. The Japanese holly trees are also pictured on page 24. So again, very beginner early landscaping. They are pretty small right now, but a Japanese holly tree will reach up to 8 to 10 feet tall and 8 to 13 feet wide. So they definitely do have the size of a tree. And so we are hoping that those trees will be sufficient. The other issue is if there is, I know there's a list, the Garden City Code, they require a tree off, a number 2 tree and a number 3 tree off of the list of trees. The concern is where we would be able to plant that along Chinden Road. So there is an irrigation swale in front of our building. It is a large rock, basically canal right there. That is property of the Fairview Acres Irrigation District. And they have that entire swale plus 7.5 feet on either side. So once they cut that 7.5 feet, that leaves us about 7 feet between our building and that edge of their property, which would be very difficult to plant one of the larger trees. It has the potential to have roots damage to go into either into our building or into the irrigation district's area. And they did have some concerns about that as well. And the fact of planting a large tree out there might impact their irrigation. So that is something I would like to address, and hopefully I'm hoping that those 3 Japanese holly trees will be sufficient, as they will be quite large once they are mature. There is also some question. There was one question on page 11 talking about the chain link fence with the barbed wire. That is actually not our property. That is property of the business to the east of us. And we did get a letter stating that you guys should also have, I believe. This is an affidavit of non-ownership. So stating that that's not actually ours. So we wouldn't be changing that. And then the other question was the entrance curbs. The curbs, there is a lot of changes that have happened since the building was remodeled even last year. There's been some changes in what the requirements are with the entrance curbage. They're discussing with sorry, let me find my thing here. Where's that? Linked. Oh, right there. It says per the Chin ITD access management plan, they're discussing on a couple different things. There are 3 curb cuts between our building and the building next to us. Our buildings are attached by a central parking lot. So we basically share a parking lot. They are discussing closing the curb that is directly into our parking lot and leaving open the curbs that go basically in front of their building, in front of our building. That would create a little bit of an issue with us as with the way they did the whole entire landscaping and remodel of the building last year. The curb that is now in front of our business is blocked off by the handicap spot. So they would have to enter, drive across the handicap spot, and then park. So that is something, if that comes up in the future, I know that's kind of the long-term plan, the ITD access management plan, but So it might not have to be addressed now, but just a discussion that might be difficult to cut that curb as well. They also did talk about requiring a shared access agreement between the two properties prior to occupancy. The statement, basically, we've spoken to our landlord about it, and basically those two buildings have shared that parking lot for a long time. We don't really have the ability to enforce that adjacent building, the adjacent company or property owner to comply with anything, but we would be willing to sign a shared access agreement and continue sharing that parking lot if that is required. And we just have to speak to that property owner. That property owner did talk to us at our neighborhood meeting, and they said they were in favor of the project, so they didn't see any issues. Our parking lot situation, we don't need a lot of parking spaces. We basically, owners come, spend 5 minutes dropping off their pets, and then they leave. So really, I just need enough parking for my staff and a few extra. So I don't see a lot of issues with that parking lot and how it is. There was also questions about the size of the width of the parking spaces, how it was planned, and that's on page 13. How it's planned, it says it's slightly inadequate, being slightly smaller parking spaces than what code requires. So right now, with the way we measured the parking spaces, they are basically 4 inches too short. The one thing I would put as a caveat is we weren't exactly sure how you measure the parking spaces. So we measured from inside of white line to inside of white line, but the white lines themselves are 4 inches. So if you actually add that 2 inches on either side, including that white line, then we are up to code. So we weren't quite sure how they actually measure, but it also should not really interfere with much since our clients are basically coming, dropping off and leaving. So we won't have as much issue with small parking spaces as we would have built business that might have people coming and staying for a long term. Those are basically the things that I wanted to address with you guys, kind of the stuff that came up in the staff report and our thoughts on that. Good. Anything else? I don't think I have anything else at this time.
All right, thank you very much. Questions for the applicant?
I don't think I have a question. Yeah, mine.
Mr. Wild? I do. All right, no questions. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, are you ready?
I am, thank you.
All right, thank you. This is Hannah Beal, Associate Planner. And will be presenting the staff report for conditional use permit 2024-0004. It is a request for an animal care facility located at 4048 West Chinden Boulevard. The existing building appears to be a non-conforming structure, as it appears to encroach within the 5-foot rear and the 5-foot side setbacks. Non-conforming structures may continue to be occupied, enlarged, repaired, or modified so long as that non-conformity is not increased. This conditional use permit application does not propose to increase the non-conformity of the building, as they propose to keep it as is. And as the applicant previously mentioned, it did go through a building permit and it has been approved. So I will share my screen with Zoom so that way they can see it. I have a Google Street View pulled up just for reference, so you guys can tell exactly what I am talking about. The applicant has provided site photos of current conditions, as this street view is from August of 2019. It's not exactly current, but it gets the point across. So in regards to the HVAC and the trash enclosure, According to Garden City Code, Section 84A5, all on-site services such as HVAC and trash enclosures shall not be visible from the wide right-of-way or adjacent property, or it shall be screened by a privacy fence. However, due to the existing configuration of the building, the Osage right-of-way and the overhead utilities, it may not allow for the installation of privacy fencing or any kind of screening. Due to the existing site conditions, it may be difficult to meet those Republic Services standards for the trash enclosure. Republic Services did provide a agency comment that has been added as part of the record, and there has been some correspondence between myself as staff, the applicant, and Republic Services trying to figure out a solution for the existing location to no prevail unless that trash enclosure is relocated. Screening of the HVAC units may also be difficult to achieve given the proximity to Osage. The units themselves also will have their own clearance as far as like airflow regulations. Those documents haven't been provided as part of the record, but just in working with HVAC systems, that's always a given. Conditions have been drafted to ensure that code compliance is met regarding the screening of both of these, or the HVAC and the trash enclosure. However, the commission may find that the existing site is not undergoing a substantial alteration, therefore waiving the requirements of screening both the trash enclosure and the HVAC units. While we are on the conversation of Osage right-of-way, the property lies adjacent to Osage, which has been identified in the Garden City Transportation Needs List policy. And what this policy says is basically that the city has a clear and strong vision of what Osage should remain. And that is to be narrow and function as access to adjacent businesses while also utilizing the right-of-way in a more pedestrian-oriented pathway system, more of like an urban greenbelt system through the city. An example for the development of Osage that has been cited in the generation of the comprehensive plan and land use development codes is the concept of like a living street. Potential improvements that have been discussed with the commission on previous applications includes lighting, controlled access onto Osage for vehicles, adjacent landscaping and or art features and street furniture. We also have required that fencing no greater than 3.5 feet tall along the property boundary line be established. The city has not required sidewalks along Osage due to the vision of this plan. And this application is no exception. So due to the building's proximity along Osage and that encroachment or potential encroachment into the 5-foot setback, a sidewalk would not likely be feasible without demolition of a portion of the building. But that's not to say that other improvements cannot be required along Osage Street, such as landscaping. There has been a condition drafted to allow for the vision of the Osage Street pathway to be enacted along Osage, and that's in regard to the required street trees along Osage. So Garden City Code 84I requires that 3 street trees be installed along Osage, and that would be in accordance with the transportation needs list. However, there's also a condition that contradicts this, in that the condition allows for the waiver of those 3 required street trees along Osage due to the existing site conditions. And then also in talking about landscaping now, there are concerns regarding the lack of overall landscaping on the site. A landscape plan was not formally submitted, but staff did take measurements of where the existing landscaping is on site and got the square footage, which is compliant with code. So there is 5% landscaping on the site. However, of that 5%, it does not appear that the 70% landscape material is met. And that could be just because the landscape plan was not submitted and it's not evident based off of site photos that were submitted. Code requires that every frontage adjacent to a right of way requires street frontage trees or street trees. Usually this is in the form of street trees within a landscape buffer between the right of way and a detached sidewalk. However, Osage doesn't require a sidewalk, but they could be placed within a quote unquote frontage area, which is typically seen between the property boundary line and about 20 feet back from that property boundary line. The existing structure and current ingress and egress to Osage poses issues to the application's code compliance with this section of code, which is 8.4i. And then it leaves very little room for the 3 required street trees along Osage. Staff has concerns about the vitality of the trees along Osage, considering the large amount of hardscape that currently exists and the amount of room allotted for those frontage trees just due to the existing structure. And then moving on to the street frontage of West Chinden, the street frontage on Chinden would require 3 street trees. There are complications with the requirement of these 3 street trees just due to existing water lines, the Fairview Acres irrigation line, existing hardscape, and just what appears to be overall lack of placement for those street trees. So I have tried to sketch out existing conditions of what Chinden looks like underneath the asphalt. So I've provided a little sketch. You all should have it. I will also pull it up on Zoom. If my remote works. So this is, again, a sketch that I have done to illustrate what the site conditions are. This is a picture of not the property, the subject property, but it is the best angle that I could find. And it is relative to the application's property as well. So bear with me. So we have the blue lines. This is reflected of the one closest to Chinden is a Garden City water line that is running adjacent to Chinden. And then we also have another blue line further back into the properties, which is the Fairview Acres irrigation line. Both of these water line and the irrigation line have certain setback standards that would conflict with the trees and their tree roots so that the tree roots can't essentially break either the irrigation or the water line. We have been with Garden City staff, development services staff has been working with Idaho Transportation Department on a Chinden streetscape, trying to get a wider sidewalk with street trees between the sidewalk and the Chinden right of way. The red lines, as shown, is a 10-foot wide sidewalk, which is what ITD is wanting as part of this policy. But they're also saying that a 2-foot wide separation between curb and tree is required at minimum. So the green square with a T in it is essentially as close as a tree could get. However, that is over the top of the Garden City water line. So the tree would need to be set back further. The pink square is essentially roughly the area in which we can plant trees. However, the sidewalk can be placed anywhere around it, as that's not necessarily conflicting with the water line or the irrigation line. So in keeping this diagram in mind, the pink circle or square is essentially on the 7-ish foot wide asphalt, which is also on the subject property. And you can see it from the aerial, but I will try and go into street view. So if we remember that pink square, it would essentially be on this backside asphalt area of where the street trees could go while maintaining the existing sidewalk. And this is so long as our Public Works Department and Fairview Acres can approve of those distances of where those street trees could go, as well as working with ITD to make sure the canopy doesn't impede the right of way. With all that being said, this policy that I was just describing of trying to enhance the Chinden streetscape is not an adopted policy, even though it is definitely in the works between Garden City and ITD. So it cannot necessarily be enforced unless they are specific conditions of this conditional use permit. There is a condition drafted as such to work with staff and ITD and Fairview Acres to get a acceptable streetscape plan, and that's for sidewalks and street trees. However, if that seems inappropriate for this particular application, the commission can approve the existing site conditions per the sidewalk policy, because the adjacent properties on both sides of this property are attached sidewalks and they are the same. So if the streetscape enhancements is not appropriate, you can approve as existing. However, that would need to be a condition that the commission makes. And just in trying to answer some of what the applicant brought up just previously, there is a condition regarding the existing chain link fence on the eastern side of the property. However, that condition can be removed because they have submitted an affidavit of non-ownership regarding that fencing. So if you're referencing the conditions of approval, it would be condition number 3 under prior to occupancy found on page 7. That can be removed because staff has looked at that affidavit. There is also a condition regarding a cross access easement between the subject property and the adjacent property to the west, located at 4082 West Chinden, due to the shared access that they both utilize here on West Chinden Boulevard, as well as what seems to be a shared parking area. ITD does anticipate closure of one of these 3 access points here onto Chinden. We have the westernmost access point, which only connects to the 4048 property. We have this shared access, which connects both properties. And then there used to be an access in this location. From what I can tell, the Chinden Access Management document identifies this area as having an access point in which they wanted to close, which has already happened. So ITD is allowing for these 2 access points to remain open for the time being, but because of that shared access agreement has been conditioned. So with that, I'll stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Veal. Any questions from the commission? Commissioner Brown?
Mr. Chairman, yes, I have a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
And a couple of them will not be questions. They will be statements. Okay, because of my previous life. I've had a lot of dealings with Chinden and Osage. And for the people that don't know what I'm reading to, for 17 years, I was the manager of engineering at Ada County Highway District. So with regard to this, it's a good presentation, and this is not a question, kind of statement that will make it apparent it's even more difficult on Chinden than what has been presented. On this drawing and on this one, on this picture, the right-of-way that belongs to ITD is behind that curve. The right-of-way on this picture is behind this curb before you get to the property, and that the sidewalk and the asphalt path behind it, which was part of it when they originally built Chinden, they put that was built as a right side multi-use pathway 10 feet wide. And the reason that I can categorically tell you that the right of way is that curb is because that post right there where the arrow is, those posts are street lights that are in the right of way. That's the way that was part of the cross section that was built when Chinden was built using federal dollars. So what I'm saying is that makes it so the area where you would normally be putting our street trees and stuff doesn't belong to the applicant or to the owner of the property. It belongs to ITD. And then, so that wasn't a question. That would just point out to supplement what you presented. It makes it even more difficult to put requirements to putting landscaping. And now I would like for you to go back to the picture that you started with, please. If you would do it for was on Osage. Yeah, that one. Now this Osage is a terrible problem. It in Stockton across the other way because it's such a narrow right of way. It's actually a street. And you've heard me mention this before. It was inherited when the streets were turned over from Garden City to ICHD. But the problem with that's in the back, it's even worse than what you can envision. The right of way of Osage that belongs to ACHD is behind the telephone poles. The right of way corresponds with that fence where you can see, in fact, that concrete slab where the door is, it actually encroaches a little bit into ACHD right of way. That fence line right there, I'm very positive, is on the right of way. So everything toward the street, to including where the poles are, Idaho Power puts their poles inside the right of way. By doing that, they have a right to do that, and they don't have to buy the right of way. And so that's why I can categorically tell you that the right-of-way line is inside of where the concrete slab is. It corresponds with where the fence. What I'm saying is that the way they have it right now with that dumpster, and that dumpster probably encroaches most of the time onto the right-of-way of ACHD, which re-emphasizes what Hannah has explained about the difficulty of the landscaping, the requirement, but there's just no feasible way that they could put a screen in there to screen those items. It's a really major problem up and down Osage. So I apologize for not being a question of so much as a talk.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. Any other questions? Nope. All right. Thank you, Ms. Beal.
Thank you.
Now we'll open it up for the public hearing. Do we have anybody signed up from the public?
Chairman, not here in person.
All right, is there anybody in Zoom that would like to speak on this application? Seeing no hands or no indication, we will now close the public hearing. And we will take rebuttal testimony from the applicant. You're back up.
I don't know that I have much to rebut because it sounds like, as Commissioner Brown stated, like building those enclosures would be very difficult in the tree. And like Hannah stated, along the front, planting 3 larger trees along that front is nearly impossible without damaging the building or encroaching on the irrigation district's property. So, and that thought was taken into factor when they did the landscaping, and that's why they planted those 3 larger type of shrubs, basically the Japanese holly, up close to the building, because those do not have a long root system that's going to damage the building. So I don't think I have anything to rebut.
Nope, that's great. And that'll give the commissioners any other opportunities to ask you all questions.
I did have
Sorry.
one thing. Sorry, the lands.
Can you
the-
state your name and address for the record?
Brett Strozakowski, 2835 North Devlin Avenue, Meridian, Idaho. The landscape plan was submitted on 4th February. So
Oh, yeah.
it was just what what it is currently.
Okay. Commissioners, any other questions for the applicant? All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. But with that, we'll close the public hearing and commence any discussions on this matter. Commissioner Wild?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Brown has made a compelling, as if we didn't have enough explanation for how difficult it would be to comply with these tree conditions and covering the dumpster or shielding the dumpster and the HVAC units. Commissioner Brown has kind of put an exclamation point on the end of that thought. So I think I'm going to focus my time on cross-access agreement, which I think can and should be required. So I'll be supportive of that as a condition. The fencing can't be removed because they don't own it. And again, I haven't heard anything that would suggest that what the conditions that are at issue here can even feasibly be pulled off. So I would support, I guess, waiving those conditions.
Thank you, Commissioner Wild. Commissioner Shepherd?
Thank you, Chairman. I also agree with waiving the conditions for the HVAC and the trash dumpster enclosures for the reasons we discussed. The space on Osage Street, and I'm also in support of waiving the trees because of the space on Osage Street. Thank you, Commissioner Brown, for the education on that, because that I didn't know all of that about the encroachments, but and also I'm in favor of waiving the trees on Chinden based on what you talked about with the ITD right away. And that's all I have for the discussion for it. I'm in favor of waiving all 3 reasons.
Thank you, Commissioner Shepherd. Commissioner Brown?
I agree, and thank you for the commissioners. I agree with everything they've said and won't go back over those. I would add one thing. I think we should say with regard to the 70% and the other landscaping that we'll accept the Japanese, whatever they call them, and count on what the young lady told us, that when they're grown out, they'll take care of the 70% requirement.
Thank you, Commissioner Brown. I also agree with the commissioners. I would like to talk about the cross-access agreement. And I do have concerns just on how that would work. And are we conditioning it on the approval that the landlord so not the tenant, because the tenant doesn't have that right to issue. If the landlord says no, then the conditional use is not approved.
I would agree with that, because he would have a tenant. He can't put the cross access agreement executed.
And
Is that your question?
yeah, so we can talk about that. My concern is then that is gonna affect their use. And the cross access agreement right now is gonna encumber the property in perpetuity. And for me, it just seems excessive on the tenant to be required to have the landlord do that. And if we're, whether or not that's important to the use, I don't know. It seems like it's more of a benefit to the neighbor than it is maybe to them, because all that they can do is issue the cross-access agreement for the neighbor to own or to use, unless we're also requiring the cross-access to be agreed to by both the party not to this, right?
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I can't believe there's not a cross access agreement there now. Because I think both.
They both already use, excuse me.
There should be one ready.
Yeah,
But I totally get your argument, but I think it's important for both of these properties to have that. It should be easy to acquire.
And
It
so,
would encumber the property.
and would you, so you would make it a condition of occupancy?
Right.
And you wouldn't just have it as a request for the landlord or the tenant to get the approval. It's gonna actually be a condition. So we're anticipating that the user is gonna go through all of this and potentially not be able to use the space because they couldn't get the cross access agreement.
Yes, I think that puts. The keys are with the landlords to get that executed, yes, and it currently works, so they may be resistant to that. But again, I think they should already have that. They should both understand that they both benefit from having that. So yes, I would make it a condition
Okay.
as drafted. I mean, it's drafted as a condition.
All right, so we have the condition.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
there was one other item that we didn't address, maybe I missed it. Which I intended to, that was the issue of the size of the parking stalls. I don't think that I think we should accept what was presented in there. If that in any way is in there, and just leave them like they are.
I agree.
They have recently, they've been restriped. I could tell by looking at the one picture. They had a slurry seal put on the parking lot and then they painted them. And so I wouldn't require any changes there.
Slurry seal on half the parking.
Yeah,
On
they
this
did.
front-
Yeah, you can see it. You can see that. That's within, I would say within the year. But so I don't know if it's in there or not. Maybe we should ask Chandler.
Yeah, I didn't see that was a
I didn't pick it up.
condition of the approval to adjust the parking size. Ms. Neal, can you clarify that for us, please? And as you're looking for that, can I just ask another question of you? That would be whether or not that would align with the non-conforming, so as long as it's not substantial?
Mr. Chairman, there is not a drafted condition in there allowing for the too small of parking sizes. However, it's not in code of how that measurement is taken. So if we wanted to measure it from the outside of the white stripes versus the inside, or just leave it as is and consider that appropriate. Code doesn't say one way or the other. There is a condition in there saying that the existing vehicle parking spaces are sufficient for the use. And that's condition number 2 under scope of the permit. Can you repeat your second question?
So I just want to make sure that we can approve what we're discussing. based on the non-conforming as long as it's not substantial.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
So with that, like I said, I do agree with the fellow commissioners, except for the cross-access agreement. But do understand the reasoning behind it, so. At this point, any other discussion? All right, hearing no other discussion, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Wild,
I will move to approve the conditional use permit to remove the requirements for the 3 frontage trees along Osage. Also, the trees on Chinden. Also to remove the requirement for the Osage. Is it Osage or Osage? I've always wondered. Not important,
Sure.
not important.
Oh,
The requirements for covering the HVAC or screening the HVAC units, as well as the trash receptacle. But to include a requirement for a cross-access agreement for use of the 2 adjacent parking lots.
I hear a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those, no? No? The ayes have it. All right, any other business to take care of? All right, hearing none, then I will call the meeting and we will be adjourned. Thank you all.
Good job.